I hate that I'm not able to be there with you today. I'm actually taping this message today from our new adaptive reuse entrepreneurship incubator facility in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's really helping kind of train our entrepreneurs and bring more industry to it. I have truly enjoyed our first year together and look forward to another exciting year with you guys and more content and insight series papers and content. I've enjoyed traveling to many of the chapters and doing events with you and hope it's bringing value to you as well. So speaking of last year and our first year together in this collaboration, I want to do a quick update on the 3 papers that we did because we've had some news around that. Amazon HQ2, we've all lived with the news that Amazon decided to do a split decision, and now they're going back to a one decision. And what does that mean? Are they going to reopen the process? What should the CCIM Institute take away from all of that? I think one of the big beneficiaries out of Amazon pulling out of New York is probably going to be North Carolina. Their proximity to DC, their universities, their workforce, skilled workforce, everything play into a hand that if Amazon will maybe more follow the Google model, quiet expansion and growth rather than a big fanfare, I think that North Carolina is going to be a big beneficiary. In addition to that, after the split decision was announced with New York and Northern Virginia, I started receiving a lot of calls from technology and data and security companies from New York and Northern Virginia concerned about the Amazon effect. They were concerned about 2 things. First, the poaching of the workforce, because if we learned anything about the Amazon HQ2 search process, they didn't stay true to the RFP, which was all about workforce, because as we know from LinkedIn that the city with the worst skills gap in America for finding skilled workforce was New York, worse than Seattle and worse than San Francisco. So they're obviously concerned that Amazon's workforce availability was going to be poachability. And the other one was the tremendous increase in wages that they would probably result in the market. And so most of the companies that I've talked to, they've expressed their interest in particularly looking at Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So I think one of the things we're going to find out of the Amazon HQ2 search was that the selection of New York really resulted in the political leaders and even the company like Amazon needing to go back to site selection 101. The second one we did was adaptive reuse. We're deep into our research right now. We're doing case studies to build on what we published. So as you recall, the first paper we did on adaptive reuse was defining it, quantifying it, giving you the myriad of examples. And so where we're going now is we've been collecting case studies and we're analyzing those. So we're still open. If you've got a particular case study or developer that you can share with us, send us that information in. We're hoping mid-year this summer we'll have an update on that'll bring the metrics like the cap rate and the debt service coverage and the cost issues, all that we began to queue up in the first paper. They'll actually bring context and metrics and numbers around that banks and life companies in the securitization world are looking for. The third one was the CRE finance disruption paper that we did, and so I raised concerns that we were getting ready to look at a disruption here, and boy did I have no idea what was going to happen in December. And I promised Barbara in January that we would turn it all around, and we had our best January in the stock market in 30 years. So I remain true to my commitment to Barbara that we're not going to have a recession this year. The other point that I want to emphasize regarding the legacy reports that we did in 2018 is I really want to compliment the leadership in the CCIM Institute for following through and listening to what you, the members, have said in terms of the need for forward-looking content and information that really build on the education promise that you're delivering on right now. That the CRE Insight series is exactly what the members wanted, and it's absolutely delivering traffic and visibility to the Institute at a time where we really need that in our commercial real estate industry. So I want to compliment Dave Wilson, Barbara Crane, and Eddie Blanton for really making and bringing this whole CRE Insight series together, and of course the great staff there in Chicago that make it all happen and pull it together. The second thing is I want to really reinforce the importance of this information, this training, the education, and all the different ways that the Institute is pivoting, whether it's through new upcoming webinars, the Insight series, the education offering, to really keep you all tuned up. Whether you got your CCIM 10, 20, 30 years ago, or whether you're just getting it now or you're coming on path. So I want to really encourage to stay the course on that, because there is a huge hunger in the industry today for this deep dive education and then the tune-up to keep you tuned up as we go forward. So we produced these papers last year. What are we going to deliver for you this year? So this next report really looks more at your career, keeping you tuned up. What are all these disruptive and transformative changes having in the marketplace, and how we do site selection and market analysis. It's basically taking a forward look at how our industry is changing. Not just the industry, but how technology, how data, all of these elements are changing the way we used to analyze and think and value real estate. And what are the new metrics that we should look at? What are the new data sources that we should look at? In this report we're developing, the board of directors and all are delivering, we're going to be delivering webinars on each of these papers. So there's another way of delivery. It won't just be the physical paper or the online paper, but there'll be a webinar in which we'll be engaging probably with some of the CCIM instructors and debating back and forth some of these points. This next paper is chock full of information on how we pivot and change from the factors that are forcing and changing us on the economy, whether it's how we look at workforce, where we get our data, whether we look to LinkedIn workforce instead of government data, whether it's how we analyze and think about things like co-working, how we look at industrial, and whether the metric is now needs to pivot to cubic feet instead of square feet, how we look at retail and adaptive reuse for opportunity zones, logistics infrastructure as a site selection metric. All of these things are fleshed out in this new paper, so we really want to encourage you to spend some time with it and look forward to that webinar where you'll even get more value add out of the paper as we deliver a new webinar thing. Thank you to the board of directors for delivering this new piece of delivery that you can share with yourselves, your students, and your clients. Most of you know that I'm not a huge fan of the government's Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers. I don't think anybody's a fan after the numbers for February that were just released today of only 20,000 jobs after 2 months of over 300. So you know that I've traditionally looked at ADP, which processes more payrolls than anybody, and that gives us a lot of granular stuff, and it's not a survey. And the other one, though, that I'm more excited about is the LinkedIn Workforce Report. A couple of key things I want you to take away from it. So LinkedIn Workforce is kind of the big data that drills down into what we're doing. In fact, LinkedIn knows when you're going to change your job before you do it. There's over 190 million of us that have LinkedIn accounts, and they stratify all 190 million of us based on our industry skill set. So they stratify us from whether we're a welder to a broker to a realtor to a doctor to a lawyer, and they produce these skill gap analyses at an MSA level that tell us which skill sets by MSA are in most demand and which are producing that supply. So if you're doing a site selection or market analysis and want to know where the engineers are most in demand and likely to go and what that means for commercial real estate, or where welders and whatnot are in, say, the energy states or the shale regions, the LinkedIn Workforce is your big data solution that we don't have anywhere close to in government data today. The other one we talk about is what's happening with logistics in our e-commerce economy and society. So we just recently published a paper called Logistics Infrastructure, and in this paper we unpack and look at why and where are these warehouses going in the e-commerce, and with the advent of the opportunity zones kicking in later this year, it ties in with our adaptive reuse properties. And why is Amazon, for example, interested in buying closed Sears department stores, and why is Kroger partnering with Walgreens to bring grocery back to drugstores when I think 20 years ago we took drugstore and pharmacy out of drugstores and put it in grocery. All of this stuff is having a huge impact. So understanding logistics infrastructure is as important an element in site selection that we maybe have not dealt with in the past. And it's more than just roads and bridges. It's ports, it's road, rail, it's intermodal, it's all of these pieces. The third one we look at is we dive into by property type. Some of the changes are happening. So let's pick an obvious one, pivoting off of logistics, industrial. How much longer are we going to continue to talk about industrial in terms of rents and sales price, in terms of price per square foot? It's all about the cube. And I think that CCIM Institute is in a unique position here, and with this paper, to really help elevate its time to pivot from maybe price per square foot and rent per square foot to price per cube and sales price per cube. So speaking of the industrial property type and maybe what's happening on warehouses and when will we finally go to cubic foot metrics, there's a company in Iowa called ClearSpan, and they've led the technology in creating these new temp warehouses. Amazon is actually experimenting with it in Memphis, Tennessee right now. And any of you that have been to the Denver airport, you know the tent fabric that creates the terminal station. They're using that same technology in metal frame warehouses that they can put up at, say, $35 to $40 a square foot versus over $100 a square foot. They can build them in 3 to 6 months versus a year and a half to 2 years, and they can dismantle them if something changes in their supply chain. So when we look at technology, not just blockchain and AI, and the metrics, the design and technology is having a transformative effect. The other one that we're looking at, and we spent some time on, is looking at co-working. So believe it or not, the first co-working model goes back to the 1950s. Sam Zell does a good job. He made a mistake in investing in the first one in the 1950s, and he'll tell you that every one of these models have failed to this point. So what is it that makes us think that co-working is really going to work this time around? Is the WeWork model the right way to go, or is what CBRE, the model that they're taking, which is basically to teach companies how they can do the kind of co-working model themselves without an intermediary? The other thing that's important about it, is there a point in which occupancy or ownership in a building that is so much co-working has a positive or an adverse impact? We're not going to have all the answers in this paper, but we're seeing some entities starting to give us data around it. TREP, that follows a lot of the securitization stuff, has started to do some research around that. We'll share with you in the paper the detail of what TREP is finding and what that threshold point is in co-working occupancy that either has a positive or negative impact on it. And of course, retail with adaptive reuse and opportunity zones. The investment opportunities and opportunity zones are adaptive reuse projects. And so the foundation work that we did last year, the updating that we're going to do this year, looking at retail and how we value and price retail in particular. What are these malls where we're seeing them converted in Nashville to medical uses by Vanderbilt? We're seeing in Dallas, Texas, them go to a warehouse, a FedEx fulfillment. And in Atlanta, we just saw one of our major suburban malls was acquired by a group out of Las Vegas that's going to convert the mall to a cricket stadium. So, I mean, from cricket to warehouses to medical office, retail is going to be very transformative. And if most of you remember back to your original market and site selections coursework, we relied heavily on traffic count maps. Is any of us ever going to look at a traffic count map? Maybe the new traffic count is our mobile devices. And so companies like Verizon and AT&T are providing us with the data metrics to understand the mobile traffic that's occurring around your retail. So this latest paper that we have, while it's important to deal with the transformative elements of data and metrics and property type changes, there's a bigger message in this latest report. This is kind of a call to action that speaks to the heart of what CCIM, the purpose of CCIM, and that is your education purpose. And so CCIM is a leader that's well recognized in terms of not only giving you the foundation for training, but keeping you tuned up. This paper really reminds you that all of these things that are changing mean we all need to keep ourselves tuned up. Whether we got designated and pinned 10, 20, 30 years ago, or you're still working on it and you're coming along. Even the new people, when you get designated 10, 20 years from now, you're going to be looking at what have you done to keep yourselves tuned up. So this is a real call to action to do two things. Number one, appreciate and recognize that you are a leader in education, and that's a core purpose in addition to the relationship building. But also keep the education advancing, keep paying attention to these disruptive and transformative changes, and keep updated the curriculum offerings and the ways you deliver them.